and welcome to our very first seminar or webinar today, might say. Today's webinar is going to be about buying property in 2019. So look, this is the first time that we've used this software, so we're not really sure how it's going to go, how it's going to turn out, but to make your lives easier, we've committed to doing these webinars at convenient times to share the information and what we come across when we're dealing with clients on a day-to-day basis. My name's Riz Malik and I'm the Managing Director of R3 Mortgages. R3 Mortgages, a property financing company based in Southend with an office shortly due to open in London, and ultimately we assist people through their property financing journey. So without further ado, let's begin. Before we kickstart, just want to go through a disclaimer. Just want to say that this webinar is for general information purposes only and doesn't constitute financial advice. Please do not act or refrain from acting on the information that you hear about in this presentation without first seeking professional advice. And R3 Mortgages accepts no liabilities for any errors, inaccuracies, or omissions. Okay, so let's go through the agenda of what I want to go through today. So in terms of buying property in 2019, what we're going to do is we're going to look at an overview of the property market of where we are today. It's December, Christmas is around the corner. I know we're all looking forward to the festive break, but after that, 2019, I think it's going to be a very interesting year for the property market, and let's see exactly what it holds for us. Then going to start talking about the property buying process. Now, sometimes we take it for a given, especially ourselves who do this type of thing in the day in and day out, that everybody who goes through a property knows exactly what these are before they get the keys in their hands ultimately. And I'm going to go through and just talk about the buying process. We're then going to move on to those of you who are looking to buy their first property in 2019 or move property and things that you need to consider. Going to then talk a little bit about the other side of the coin and those looking to maybe start a portfolio or expand their portfolio, even review what they've got for 2019. I'm then going to share some hints and tips about making the process easier for yourself and the steps that you can take to take the stress out of the situation. Buying property is a very, very stressful situation, especially with how things are and the way that the laws of this land work, i.e. that in most cases, until contracts are exchanged, you're physically not locked into a transaction and either parties can walk away. So there are a number of things that you can do to help yourself and those advising you as well to make the process as easy as possible. And then we're going to have a Q&A, see if there's any questions or any burning issues that you've got that would be more than happy to help answer. So let's crack on. Well, let's start off by going with an overview of the property market in 2018. 2018 or 2019? Let's see where we are at the moment. Okay, so overview of the market in 2019. You may have heard of this thing called Brexit. It's contributing to quite a bit of uncertainty in the market at the moment, whether it's for individuals, whether it's companies, or it's just generally people deciding whether it is a good time to buy property. Okay, so Brexit's Brexit, really. That's all we can say. There's nothing that we or individually can do to influence it. The public have spoken. The key date now is going to be the 29th of March, when we fully instigate Brexit, or as of the 8th of December, whether we do go ahead with it or don't go ahead with it. But like anything, Brexit is causing uncertainty in the market. Now, having been the study of economics, the one thing that financial markets in general don't like, and you may have seen a lot of volatility in the currency markets and some in the financial markets, is that we don't like uncertainty. Okay, and what is Brexit bringing to us? Nothing but uncertainty, because from hour to hour, day by day, I think there's not enough clarity in terms of where everything's going. So what happens when people are uncertain? The first thing that they do is they put off their buying decisions or capital investments or making large purchases such as property. So hopefully as we creep into the first quarter of 2019, we should have some clarity with what the vote is going. Do we accept the deal as it is at the moment? If there are going to be any changes, are there going to be any reversions or anything like that? Or once the 29th of March happens, we see what the world looks like from there onwards. But it's definitely feeding into the property market and people deciding to do things. I'm hearing a lot of, I want to move house, but should I wait until after Brexit? I want to, expand my portfolio, but I'm not sure what's going to happen to prices. I'm reading articles about doom and gloom, about the markets falling, this, that, and the other. And the key point is that nobody knows. Unfortunately, I'd like to give you, I'd like to give you the heads up, but I don't even think the people who are doing what they're doing know what's happening at the end of the day. So unfortunately, we're going to have to deal with the hand that we're given. Okay, interest rates. Let's talk about the UK interest rates and what the outlook is at the moment. We've seen, especially on the property financing side, I'd say post the credit crunch and recent terms, some of the most competitive rates in the market. We've obviously had some base rate moves since the historic lows following the credit crunch. But again, still, if we look at a timeline, we are still looking at the probably, some of the most historic low rates that we've ever seen in the United Kingdom. Those of you who are old enough, and this will be before my time, will remember the double-digit interest rates that we have had in this country. So again, another thing that people constantly ask me, or a point of discussion, is what happens to interest rates, go up or go down, left and right. And certainly it is the case that I'd say the majority or a large proportion of mortgage business that's transacted these days occurs on fixed rates, because people want the stability, or some people want the stability that they know where they are. But then conversely, what are the disadvantages? Well, people who borrow money and take it on fixed rates, if you fix in, then if the markets go up or within the terms of what you're doing, then your rates will stay the same. But conversely, if the rates go down, then potentially you could have locked into a higher rate. So it's down to you at the end of the day in terms of what's doing. But we're certainly seeing a lot of fixed rate activity, because again, feeding into the uncertainty of what people are looking at. In terms of property prices, well, where do we go with property prices at the end of the day? Only today, there's more information that's come out with regards to house price growth, and it being the lowest in the, actually, let's get it up. On the Guardian today, UK house price growth slips to a 6-year low amid Brexit uncertainty. House prices have risen, at a dramatic stage. And in terms of the growth, if it's not being led by, and this is certainly on the residential side, it's led by equal wage growth, there is going to come a time where it's going to come uncropper. And again, the uncertainty all fixes into the house price movement as well. But people are still, selling properties. People are still buying properties. We're still seeing purchase transactions going through, and a lot of the purchase transactions we're seeing go through, I'm seeing more first-time buyers, people getting involved in the market for the first time. So transactions are still happening. I think just the average time that the properties are on the market is just taking slightly longer. So that's really what we're seeing from that point. Has property been a good investment compared to other asset classes? Well, there's some reports and evidence to suggest that if you look at property prices versus other asset classes, it's certainly, done very well over time. But then conversely, it depends on what the other asset classes that you are looking at. People are still purchasing properties. People are still purchasing properties to live in as well as for investment. So only time will tell. Okay, going to move on to the property buying process. And Again, these are just some things that we're sharing from what we have seen from clients and what feedback that we've had, and the suggestions and hints and tips that we can give. And if you are looking to buy a property, I don't care whether it's residential, whether it's commercial, whether it's for you to live in, whether it's for you to rent in, whatever, any property transaction that you should do, the first thing you should do is research the hell out of that transaction. So many people come to us and say, oh, we want to buy this property. All right, so what do you know about it? What do you know about this? Can't even tell us on the flat what the service charges are, or what the ground rent is, or whether there's any escalation in the service charges or anything like that, or any more specifics about the property. You really need to research the transaction that you are doing. Now, there are so many tools available now for you to be able to actually go in and research exactly the property that you're looking to buy. You can go onto the house buying portals, and they will give you information, or they'll give you guides as to what your property may be worth. Now, a lot of those use background algorithms based on other transactions that's happening in the area, so I'd take that information with a pinch of salt, but it gives you a good indication in terms of what's the situation. Has there been a lot of liquidity in the property market in that area? If you're living on a street and houses are sold once every 10 to 20 years, then it's very hard, it's harder, I'd say, to get an accurate description of what the pricings are in that area, versus if you've got a situation where there's a lot of liquidity and fluidity of transactions in your area, as well as using the property portals, Zoopla, Rightmove, to name a few. Also, there's a lot of information that you can get from using the government's tools, such as land registry. You can go onto there and you can find out about information about the property, when who's the legal owner of the property, what the title plans are doing it. So for an investment of £3, whatever it costs on there, we go on the basis, because if you want to get some accurate information, that's a very good place to go with regards to it. So please research. I cannot stress that enough. Overriding all of this is the fact that normally when you are making these property transactions, these are the biggest transactions that you're going to make, okay, or a lot of people are going to make, let's say. So you want to make sure that at the end of it, when you've got the keys in your hand, you're not left with somebody else's nasty surprises. I constantly say this to people: please don't make sure and be so keen to be purchasing that property that you are left holding the can on problems that you may have known about had you taken that step further. Okay. The second thing I want to go through about is location. Location. Again, whether it's for owner occupation or whether it's for investment, if you're buying property in 2019 and want to see about what is going to potentially add to the future growth, look at the location. Things like schools, okay? We all know how demand for property prices in the areas of schools that have got a very good reputation or have got good Ofsted ratings is, and how much competition there is for people to get into those schools, and also some things that the parents do to make sure that junior goes to that school. So look at things like schools, infrastructure. Is it close to transportation links? Are there any future developments for transportation links? Is anything going to happen in that area that is going to positively impact your property? Is there anything negatively that's going to happen in your area which is going to have a detrimental impact to your property transaction? Is there going to be a new plane flight path going over your lovely 2 up 2 down property that you're going to spend the next 25-30 years of your life repaying? These are the things that, again, feeds back into research, but it's really important. Okay, another thing there is organizing your finances. Okay, my God, I cannot stress the importance of this point. Okay, so many occasions, myself, other brokers, banks, whenever I talk to people, We have people coming to us where they're saying, yeah, I want to do this deal, I've committed to this deal, I've said to somebody that I'm going to do it, whatever, and they've done nothing with regards to taking any preparatory steps to sort out their property financing. Okay, then they come to the person who's going to sort out their financing and say, this is what I want to do. Now, if you know, or you've got a fantastic credit rating and there's nothing in the background and your situation is quite straightforward, then I can understand your lax attitude maybe to not sorting out the property financing beforehand. But even if you do fall into that category, when you do make a deal, or when you speak to an estate agent or anything like that, the first questions they're going to ask you is, okay, Mr. Customer, how are you going to finance this transaction? Unless the answer is, sorry, I'm going to finance it from money that I've got sitting in the bank, you are going to lose credibility with that person. If you said, okay, Mr. Estate Agent or whoever, here's an agreement in principle that I've already got by a lender, they are likely to take you much more seriously with regards to the transaction. So before you do anything, you know what type of property range you're going to look at. Go and sort out your financing in advance. So when you do the deal, and if you do need to move quickly on the deal, if you've done a lot of the preparatory work with regards to sorting out the money, it's going to make the whole process easier, especially if you've got a deadline to work to. Okay, I can't stress that important enough, because I see that on a regular basis and it causes nothing but headaches. And again, let's go back to this whole transaction. Buying a property is one of the most stressful things that you can do. Okay, we deal with people when they're getting divorced and they're going separate ways and they're buying property. So you've got two of the most stressful things that you can do, maybe combined together. Sort out the money. And also, if you're going to somebody and you're purchasing a property from an agent or from a various source, and they say, okay, before we can put the offer forward to the other party, we need you to sit down with our own, broker or financial advisor to go through your figures, politely decline. Okay, nobody can force you where you get your financing from. Okay, if they're going to put that to the client, then fantastic. If you don't want to give them your financial information, or you want that process to be independent of where you're buying the property from, you perfectly have that right. So just be careful when people say to you about we to vet you as a seller. If you've got an agreement in principle, and I give one of my clients, let's say hypothetically, an agreement in principle, and they can satisfy that, look, we've got all the preparatory stuff that we can do with regards to buying a property, why do you need to sit for an hour or 2 hours in front of somebody else to prove to them that you can buy that property? So it's up to you where you want to get your financing from. Make sure that you know what people, don't go down a road if you don't want to. Let's just leave it at that. Okay, now making the offer. Making the offer is all down to the art of negotiating. There's loads of books you can read on negotiating, but ultimately it's very, very straightforward. You have a position that you're starting from. The person who's selling the asset that you want to acquire has a position that they're starting from, and usually you'll negotiate with each other and you'll meet in the middle. Now, if you're in a seller's market, your negotiating ability is somewhat limited, because if there's a number of buyers looking to queue up, or there's a lot of demand for that property, then your ability to negotiate isn't as strong as if you're in a buyer's market and the buyers come at a premium and there has to be that negotiation. One thing that I would like to say, okay, in about making offers on property, and I think this just needs to play out. You're making an offer on property. Let's say hypothetically the place is being sold for 250,000. Okay, you say, no, I'm going to put an offer in of 230,000. The agent or whoever's selling the property comes back and says, no, that's not acceptable. Okay, then I'm going to put an offer for 235,000 or 240,000, and then they come back to you 10 minutes later and say, okay, no problem, I'm going to put in 248,000 or something. Think about what message, when you're making your offers and doing the negotiating process, are you showing the other party? Straight away, if you start from one position and jump up in a very short period of time, they're going to get an indication of knowing that A, how further much you could go, and B, that you really want the property. So when you're negotiating, I know it's hard to say, and if it's for an investment, it's a lot easier to do, but take the emotion out of the transaction. Okay, if you want to secure a good deal and you want to potentially see if the guy's gonna, or the lady's gonna come, whoever's gonna sell it, the property's gonna come down on the price, take your time with the negotiation problem, the negotiation process. Okay. Valuations, God, this is one of the other things which is one of the bane of our lives at the moment, is in terms of property valuations. Again, you might have been on the search engines and they may have told you that the property is worth X, Y, or Z, and then a valuer goes out to value the property and he comes up with a completely different figure. I've recently had a case, asked the client, Mr. Client, what's the property value? 400,000. Valuer goes out, what's the property value? 300,000. Okay, the down vals are very common on higher value properties because, again, the liquidity and the access to buyers at the higher values is somewhat limited to lower price properties where a lot more people can afford them. So that's more common to see that on the higher properties. But again, when you are purchasing the property, make sure that you're utilizing the services of a value. And going on to another point of this, it astounds me how many people spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds and just I'll go for a basic valuation. Many lenders these days offer free valuations as part of their incentive packages for you to use them or to buy a property. Okay, just because it's going to tick the box with the lender and the lender comes back and says that they're happy to lend, if you're just having a basic valuation done on a property, unless you have got the technical sophistication of a surveyor or a structural engineer or something like that, really think about, should I be paying some extra money and getting somebody who's in the know doing a bit more comprehensive report on the property? Now, that's not going to guarantee that the person's going to take everything and find out every little thing that's going to be wrong with the place. However, it is going to mean that someone who's got specific training to go and look objectively, and the key word here is objectively, because they don't have a vested interest in your property transaction, they can look for the points of the property. Now, if you get somebody to do that, the advantage of doing that is, if it comes back, and let's say hypothetically you got home buyers report, you know, a 20-page report going through the property saying that, well, this is on its way out, this needs doing, this may be needing attention, the roof may be needing attention, you can then use that as a negotiating tool to go back to the person selling the property and saying, look, my offer before was based on X, Y, and Z, here's the valuation, and this is what it's come up with. The advantage of that is that very few people are going to be able to argue if a qualified professional has inspected the property. Okay, because if they pick up on something and then they turn around and say, no, we're not going to reduce the price, we'll go with somebody else, if they go and get the same type of report done, they're going to be in the same position. So please, please, please think about the valuation you're going to do on a property. It's not necessarily as much for a remortgage, because in most cases you only own the asset. But when you are buying a property, whether it's residential, investment, buy to let, whatever, commercial, look at the valuation that you're having, and the bricks and the mortar, ultimately, or whatever construction it is robust. Moving on swiftly to the legals. Okay, again, the most important part of one of the most important parts of the transaction. Ultimately, look, you get what you pay for. Chasing the cheapest legals that they'll get them done and get them done and dusted and not have any issues from there onwards is one way to look at it. Paying ridiculous amounts to get somebody to get done with it is another thing. But really, please, let your solicitor or your conveyancer do their job. It's what they're paid for. You might be really eager to get the property transaction done as soon as possible and move in for Christmas. I don't know what the situation is, but please, 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 that is something that you need to be considering. Okay, also on the completion, once everything's happened, you'll get the keys on your hand. That's the completion. Don't really know what more said there. Doesn't really make any sense why we can put that in. Okay, we're moving on very swiftly. Okay, first time buyers and movers. Number one, we all want to live in the biggest house that we can do. Most of us want to be living in the biggest house that we can do, and this, that, and the other. But whenever you are conducting a property transaction, please, please, please look at affordability. Affordability is the key driver when you should be thinking about buying a property. Okay, you are going to commit yourself to a period of time, you know, normally for 25, 30 years or whatever, to be making repayments back to the bank. Is the figure that's coming up for your financing affordable? If it isn't, in the short term you might be okay, in the long term you'll struggle. So please think, is the payments that we're going to be making on this debt sustainable? And remember, I will go back to my original point, we are in one of the lowest historic interest rate periods that there has been in recent history. Okay, if rates do go up in future, okay, and you still have got that borrowing, your outgoings and the amount of disposable income that you're going to have left is going to decrease if your mortgage payment happens to go up over that 25 or 30 year term. So don't just look at it today, but think of how much scope there is in the future. Help to Buy. Okay, Help to Buy scheme is still available on new build properties. There's many different caveats, and we'll do a webinar just on that in the future. It can assist you to get onto the property ladder, but again, remember, it's not free money as such, because all you're doing is deferring when you're going to have to address that issue. So again, I'd refer back to the affordability thing. Stamp duty. The point of the stamp duty is that when you are looking to buy a property, do not just look at the transaction that you are looking to do. Think about all the other associated costs. What are going to be the legal costs, the removing costs? And another one is the stamp duty. Okay, now the government's got its own calculator where you can go in and you can have a play around with the figures, which will give you an indication. The solicitors or your conveyancer as part of the transaction will give you an indication as well. Make sure you factor those costs into the budgeting for whenever you are acquiring a property. Again, you know, however you're looking to do it. Just want to touch briefly on joint borrower sole proprietor borrowing. Okay. And this can be used to help especially first-time buyers get onto the property ladder. I'm just going to quickly go through this. I know we are running out of time, but I think this is very important. Joint borrower sole proprietor. So let me give an example. Let's say a newly qualified graduate has just got their, or recently got their first job, let's say in the city, working for, I don't know, let's say a law firm, something like that. They want to buy a property, but their income isn't up to step at the moment. Let's say hypothetically, parents may have paid off the mortgage, got a low mortgage, got good jobs, have got good disposable income, and they want to help their child on the property ladder because they know that the income potential for the future of their child is likely to grow, and they want to help them get on the property ladder. Joint borrower sole proprietor allows other parties to go onto the mortgage with first-time buyers, let's say, but not on the actual title deeds. Okay, so the banks will assess the joint borrowers in terms of their borrowing capacity, but only in this scenario the child will go onto the property. So the big advantage of that is, one of them is with regards to stamp duty. If the parent went on the property and on the deeds and they've got a subsequent property, then there could be, under the current regime, a lot higher rate of stamp duty to pay than if just the child went on as a first-time buyer. Okay, so that's one of the advantages of doing the transaction. And the ideas of this scheme is that as, let's say, in this situation, the child's income goes up over time, the parents can then in future come away from it and step off it. There are implications of the people who are going on to the borrowing but not on the title deed, and it's imperative that they seek independent legal advice, because if they then want to do any borrowing in the future, they need to then declare that yes, although we're not on this particular property, we do have borrowing on another property. Or if the child falls into any issues and can't make the repayments, then the parents potentially could be liable. But it's something that we're doing more and more of. It can be done on residential transactions as well as buy to let, and used correctly, it can be a very useful tool. But I must stress, you need to know the ins and outs, especially for the people who are going on, and you must seek independent, or you should seek independent legal or professional advice. Okay, we are massively over time, but I'm going to continue anyway. Okay, so chains and buy-to-lets. What we're seeing at the moment, and this is mainly for home movers, is the time taken to sell a property seems to be much longer. Chains also at the moment seem, from what we're seem to be taking longer and longer, and potentially there's issues of people dropping out and this, that, and the other. Now, one option to consider, if you have found that dream property even, I don't know, I've got holidays in the brain, dream property, and you don't want to necessarily enter into a chain on your particular property, and makes the financial sense for you to do so, is you may consider what's called a let to buy. So a let to buy is where your current residential property is converted, let's say, into a buy to let, and then you either pull out equity or leave it as it is, and then it allows you to go on to the next transaction. So the advantage is that you don't necessarily get involved in chains with other people. The disadvantage is that when you are buying that next property, if you still have that other property, then you could affect the stamp duty rate that you're paying for your subsequent transaction. But there could be time periods where if you relinquish or sell the other property, you can make claims with regards to the difference between the two. But again, that's where you need to go and speak to your solicitor or a tax advisor with regards to that. So that is possible, and we are seeing clients doing that, especially where they don't want to be involved in long drawn out chains and they found a property that they want. Okay, very quickly going to touch on property investment. Buying property in 2019 as an investor. Now, from what we're seeing at the moment, and I'm just saying from what I'm seeing at the moment, and again, this is not necessarily representative of the whole market, but with the tax changes that have come in for buy-to-let landlords and the stamp duty changes that have come in, is buy-to-let still a good investment? The number of purchase transactions, I'd say, in 2019 that I've particularly seen are down on previous years. And I would say that that is a culmination of those points, especially down in London and the Southeast. Once you've factored in the increase in the tax that you may pay for owning a property, as well as stamp duty, versus the returns that you're going to get in terms of the rental yield, some people have been stepping back and retracting from that. So that is something to consider. However, there has been an emergence of limited company transactions as well, for those who, when they are speaking to their accountants or their tax professionals, are saying that when you are looking to buy a further property or your next property, you should consider buying in a company structure as opposed to buying your personal name. There has been a growth in that area. But again, you know, you really need to seek professional advice with regards to that. On so many occasions, I have people saying to me, Riz, I want to buy a property or I want to buy another property. And I'm like, okay, how are you going to do it? I'm going to buy it in my personal name. I said, please just do me one favor. Go and speak to your accountant, go and speak to your tax professional, tell them what you're going to do and ask them what the structure is. And in the majority of cases, they'll come back and say, okay, I've spoken to my accountant and they've said that we shouldn't be buying it personally. We may want to consider buying it within a company structure, which then means that we then look at company financing, etc., etc. The number of lenders in the limited company market have increased, and with more competition, pricing becomes more competitive. But then again, that is a conversation that you need to have with your tax professional. Okay, property investment in 2019. More and more landlords are considering houses of multiple occupancy. So you've got one house separated with a number of different people living there, because the gross yields can potentially be greater than if you just rent it out to one, you know, family on a AST. Multi-unit blocks are where you've got, let's say, a house or a building where you've got multiple units in them. So it might be an old flat house, that's got two flats in it with separate entrances, but all on one title deed, and they've never been separated. We're seeing more and more inquiries on that, and also commercial and semi-commercial investments as well, where you've got the commercial element downstairs maybe and a flat above, or conversely just commercial on its own. Again, we're seeing more and more inquiries on that. And also there seems to be, especially from the more experienced buy-to-let landlords, looking and trying to chase returns over a standard buy-to-lets, looking more at development opportunities and utilizing bridging, so they can go and buy a property, renovate it, and then sell it on the market from there onwards. In 2019, I personally think that the number of buy-to-let purchases may be relatively static, but the number of people considering buying HMOs, multi-unit blocks, commercial or developing is going to continue to be there. But again, it depends on the backdrop of Brexit. Oh, missed out a slide. So in terms of, very quickly, and I am very over my time allocation, so there's a lesson to be learnt from our first webinar here today. What can you do to make the whole process easier? Okay, number one, you can get all the information that you're going to need right first time. So if you are going to buy and enter into a transaction, especially if you've got a tight deadline that you need to hit to get the deal done at that price, because they've given you the deal on the assumption it can be done within a short period of time, get all of your information right and give it to the people who are dealing with the transaction. Making the process easier, credit files as well. Now, in so many occasions, there are situations where people think that they can be blasé with the information that they put in applications, specifically when they're trying to sort out financing. Regularly, oh, I've got a credit card, yeah, how much is it on there? Oh, what's the credit limit? Oh, I don't know, roughly this. Oh, but I clear it off each and every month. Okay. When a lender sees your application, the only thing that they can go by, or the two things they can go by, is the information you put on the actual application form and what they can find on the necessary credit reference agencies, whether it be Equifax, Experian or Call Credit. Usually, I would always suggest somebody get a copy of their credit file, whether you pay for a free trial or whether you get pay for a one-off report or whatever you do. Get a copy of your credit file and see what information is on there. Number one, is it accurate? On a number of occasions, I've had issues doing applications and I've told clients to go and consult the credit reference agencies, and they've come back and some utility company on a buy-to-let that they may have has put some marker against them, or very common, a phone company has turned around and said something and put a marker on the things. You should know your credit, you should guard your credit, you should make sure you're aware of any changes on your credit. But if you're going to do an application, if the lenders are going to consult credit reference agencies, always make sure that the information is going to tie up, which leads to my next point about the importance of accurate information. Oh my God, accurate information is very, very important. If you don't give inaccurate information, potentially not only are you jeopardizing your transaction, you're also going to potentially have issues with your financing or other parts of the process that you're doing. Now, think about it with a lender's hat on. If I'm looking at a file and everything seems to stack up, then happy days, fantastic. If something transpires to be inaccurate, what's the first thing that I'm going to do? I'm going to go back and check the whole application in more detail, because if that could be accurate, what else could be accurate? And this feeds on to my next point. Think like an underwriter. Why should they do the deal? You are not automatically entitled to borrowing from a bank, building society or financial institution. Whether you've banked with them since the day you were born or where you've got business accounts with them, there is no compulsion for them to give you financing. Okay, so any application you're making for credit, you should always think, why should the bank give me the money? Why should they do the deal? What is good about the deal? Back in the day, historically, I was always taught when you write up an application for credit, or whether it's a mortgage, if there's a note section at the end of it, give the underwriter more information as to why they should do the transaction, or if they're going to find something, is there a background information to that? So really, when the underwriter's looking at the case, they can give them reasons to do the deal, as opposed to just, it's an application that's fallen on their desk. It might be the 20th application that they've looked in the day. You don't tick these boxes, you've given no explanation, they go back and request more information from you or your broker. And then what happens? You then have to go and get that information and then supply it back to the underwriter. Now, the underwriter at the banks are not sitting there waiting for you to give them the information, and as soon as you submit it, they pick it up on their desk and they come back from lunch and they say, oh, they've picked it up. These banks are receiving hundreds, if not thousands, of applications a day. Okay, so when you then resubmit the information, going back to my previous point, your application goes back in a queue. If the lender's got loads of people off or sick or whatever, they're going to work through the queue. That could mean that that information gets reviewed in another couple of days, which you've just added onto your process and added onto potentially your stress and the delay in you getting the offer. Or that could mean you've added another 10 days if the lender's overstretched, or they haven't got a head count, or this, that, and the other. Make your life easier. Get all of the information as much up to them right first time. The offer in most cases will come a lot quicker than if you start giving people dribs and drabs of information. Also, in terms of making these property transactions straightforward, is keep all parties up to date. If there's a delay in the financing or the delays in the legals, pick up the phone to the estate agent. Tell them that this is the situation. Tell them what steps that are being remedied, so they can then communicate that back with the person whose property that you're buying. If everybody is communicated with and we all know where we are, if there are hurdles or hiccups the way, then usually people are unforgiving. People are less forgiving when you come to a situation where you're end of the transaction and the estate agent's chasing, and then you throw a curveball in there as a problem there that they've had no issue with or don't know anything about, and they go back to their seller and they feel again that information's not being shared or they're keeping. So all parties should be kept up to date. Keep your solicitor or your conveyancer up to date with how your finance application's going. Keep your bank or your lender or your broker up to date with how the legals are going, and keep the estate agent up to date with all the process they're going. A lot of people complain about being chased through the property purchase transaction. In most cases, people are only chasing you because they need information and they haven't been updated about where you were. The last thing that I'd like to say is that it's really imperative that not only when you are taking out new debt or when you're taking out new borrowing to buy property, especially in 2019, you need to review your protection options, okay? Your circumstances may be rosy, everything may be fantastic today, but if something unforeseen happens, what do you have in your financial plan that is going to make your life easier during that process? If anything happens to you, God forbid, how will your family continue living the lifestyle that you want them to? How, if you're buying a commercial property for you to be in for your company, how's your business going to continue? What provisions have you made if things don't go according to plan? I personally don't think people will give this the attention or the time that it deserves, but I personally think it's equally as important. You're going to have this borrowing again, like I said, for normally a period of 25, 30 years, however long you're going to be borrowing it. You want to make sure that if anything does happen to you, which increases the stress situation to you, that by you not making sure that you've got adequate backstop in place, that you're not compounding to that. So please do review your protection questions. And that is the end of the presentation. I apologize, I have run over for what I was looking to do initially. This is the first time and a lot of learns have been come out of it from my point of view. But if you have any questions, then you can use the functionality on here and you can ask them and I will do the best to answer them. So I'm going to throw it out. Are there any questions? Yeah, you can use the chat functionality on the right hand side to see if there are any questions. You have any questions? Okay, one question that's come in is, what do I think is going to happen to property prices in 2019? I think it's going to be a very interesting year. I think there is going to be a lot of uncertainty, and that may necessarily feed into the markets. The one overriding thing that I would say, and this is my own personal opinion, is we still live on an island and properties aren't being built quick enough to satisfy potential supply. So where the UK differs from other markets where there is an abundance of land to build on and to construct, and places like the US, where properties can be constructed and put up very quickly and cost effectively. That isn't necessarily the case in the UK. When the house planners go and try and get, buy plots and get permissions from them, and the build process, that's going to have an impact. I think with Brexit, again, depending upon what the situation is, a lot of people that I'm speaking to, including the commercial lenders, are factoring in that there may be increased costs in construction prices if that there is a decrease in the availability of the labour market. So whether it's EU nationals working in the construction industry or there not being adequate supply of talent, will push up the cost of construction, because obviously they're going to have to compete to get the people to work on their particular projects. So I think there's going to be a lot of uncertainty, but I think it really depends on what your motivation is. I say this to a lot of people, and I was having a conversation with the bank yesterday over breakfast. If you're renting at the moment, ultimately you've got benefits of renting. You're only tied into a short period of time, but also you are paying, you may be paying somebody else's mortgage. If renting is your option and you're looking at, where you can live yourself, then again, with the schemes that are available, Help to Buy, joint borrower, sole proprietor, if you want to get on the property market, it might be, a lot more plausible than you may think. And it's so surprising of the people who get introduced, let's say even to me, and they come and I sit down and I have a conversation with them and I tell them what they can potentially borrow. Or we deal a lot with, young professionals of all ages, but if they're young professionals, there's some banks and some lenders that have got enhanced schemes for them because they appreciate that over time their income's going to go up. When you tell them potentially what they can borrow, a lot of people are surprised. And then when they compare it to the rent that they have, it's normally on par, if not in some cases, it may be even lower. So it depends on what your motivations are, but I think 2019 is definitely going to be a very interesting time for the UK property market. Are there any other questions? No? Okay, well, if you have got any questions, my contact details are on the screen. You can also get in touch by emailing me at riz@r3mortgages.com. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you very much for your time. We have gone over the allotted timescales that I was looking at, and I apologise for that, but hopefully you found the information here useful, and I look forward to your attendance on our next webinar. If you found this useful and informative, or you want to share feedback, really appreciate just if you could take some time to drop me a line, tell me what you liked about it, tell me what you didn't like about it, and what improvements that we can do for the future. The whole reason that I'm sitting in my office here on a Saturday, having had a very busy week, is because a lot of people have busy lives, and I want to share the information and give out valuable, useful content we see from a day-to-day basis. We're in this game day in and day out, and again, when you're buying a property, you may buy a property once every 2, 5, 10, 15 years. I feel it's useful to have the information on your side for you to make informed judgments. So thank you very much for your time. Drop me a line if you've got any questions, and I will catch you next time. Bye-bye.